Okay, I'm going to turn the input volume up a bit because this has been a problem before with Zoom. Right. So I'm going to read this chapter from my book. The book is called Delivering the Impossible. The chapter is called Escape. And part of the reason that I'm reading through these is so that I can edit them, so that I can make them better. And so one of the things I might do, which might look a little bit weird as I'm going through this, is I might clap my hands like that, or I might hold my hand up like that, just to indicate that there's something here in the text that I need to take a look at. So this is kind of like editor's marks that I'm putting on the video, which will be easy for me to see when I look back through it. So that's just an explanation of what I'm doing. Okay, here goes. Chapter Escape, Working Software. Working software is magical. Users interact with working software in ways that can never be imagined from mocked designs or a list of specifications. Working software helps you discover value and create pull from users. Getting working software in the hands of users will give your project the best chance of success, but for many reasons, it's often a struggle. And then a quote from Arthur C. Clarke. Sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. At the turn of the millennium, a bunch of men, and they were all men, got together in a ski lodge in Utah. There they wrote the Agile Manifesto. They had all been struggling with a difficult question. How can we make project management of software development simpler and more effective? They wanted something that was simple, lightweight, and increased the chances of success. That's maybe why the manifesto itself isn't so big. It's only 68 words long. In the Agile Manifesto, there are 4 key values, and working software is the second one. Working software over comprehensive documentation. That's right after individuals and interactions over processes and tools. The primary message of the Agile Manifesto is people first. Good software comes out of discussions between people. Conversations between people, well, that's certainly one description of the user and stakeholder research that we talked about in chapter Swamp. It's the previous chapter. But right after that, the founding fathers of Agile talk about working software. Why? Why do we think that might be? Those guys who got together to talk about lightweight software methodologies, what was their experience? What from their experience caused them to mention working software as one of the 4 values? My guess is that they had all had experience of projects where the delivery of working software had been delayed or had never happened. They had worked on projects where months or years could go by before a specification was agreed and software development could start. Then they'd waited maybe more months or years before any of the people who were supposed to use the software got to touch it. For the first 40 or 50 years of software development, that's how people thought it should be done. Software development was called software engineering, and it was thought to be an offshoot of other kinds of engineering. In other kinds of engineering, at least according to this theory, nothing is built before the production of detailed plans. This is what makes the second principle of Agile, this is what makes the second principle of the Agile Manifesto so revolutionary. It is saying the engineering equivalent of have a go at building a bridge and see how you get on. And as soon as you got a prototype bridge, let people have a go at driving over it. What these guys are saying in this tiny statement is that software works differently. It isn't like building bridges. It has a different logic. It has different needs, different safety levels, and a different potential path to success. Software is different. The people who wrote the manifesto had experience of what happens if you don't push for working software. When the software is finally delivered using a traditional big design upfront approach, typically there are nasty surprises. It isn't what the users want, or maybe it was what the users wanted several years ago when the specifications were written, but in the time since you started the project, the world has changed. So what's important about working software? One thing about working software is that it's magic. Like the quote that starts this chapter says, if there's anything that counts as sufficiently advanced technology, working software is it. People respond to it as if it is magic. They respond to it instantly. They respond to it automatically and with emotion. When they press a button or click on a picture, they have an expectation of what will happen. Working software creates needs, expectations, and it evokes emotions, delight, joy, frustration, and anger. This is very different from the way people react to a checklist of functions in a requirements document. That means that pretty much the only way to find out how users are going to respond is to put actual working software in their hands. And when you do put software in their hands, users will find ways of using it that you didn't expect. Users will value aspects of the software that you didn't expect. Remember the swamp, that's the previous chapter. When you build things in the swamp, you will start to discover value. People will use what you've built in unexpected ways. You thought these were ornamental ponds. People are swimming in them. You thought these buildings you put up were just fishing huts. People are living in them year round. When you dig a hole or build a structure in a place that isn't well understood, you will find things that you didn't expect. And similarly, when you give people working software, people will react to your software in ways that you didn't expect. And they'll want it to do more than it currently does in directions that you didn't expect. When people like something, they want more of it. And this leads to something called pull. Pull is the most powerful thing about putting working software in the hands of users. Up to the point where users find something in your software that they like, that helps them get done what they want or need to do, your project has been in push mode. The sole driver for the functionality in your software was the stakeholders who originated the project. Now you have users and they have things that they want. You are in pull mode. This doesn't mean necessarily that you should give users everything that they want, but it does mean that the dynamic of the project has changed. It means that your project has changed from being just someone's idea to something that people want, something that has value. When we make working software available early, we're giving it an opportunity to connect with its audience. We're trying to create pull. We're being guided by the people who use it and want to use it in the direction of delivering more and more value. This is an extremely powerful reason for delivering working software early, but there are also others. You will never be alone if you always carry the ingredients and equipment to make, this is a quotation I'm reading. You will never be alone if you always carry the ingredients and equipment to make a martini, even if you are completely stranded on a desert island, because the minute that you start to make a martini, someone will jump out from behind a tree and say, that's not how to make a martini. Something like this is also true of developing working software. Ideally, you want software to be in the environments where it will finally be used. That means running on the computers that it's going to be running on when it's live. You want it to be accessible to real users. You want them to be able to use their real data on the real software. But the truth is that the nearer you get to doing that, the more likely it is that someone you didn't even know existed will jump out from behind a tree. These people will tell you that you're doing it wrong and try to stop you getting working software in the hands of users. This is why this chapter is called Escape, because in my head, I imagine the job of getting working software out into the world on a working environment using live data, like trying to escape from a prison camp. There's only one way to find out what all the traps are that are out there in no man's land, and that's by trying to set them off. Cocktails? Prison camps? Okay, I'm mixing metaphors. Let's stick with the man behind the tree for a moment. Most of those things that the man who jumps out from behind a tree will bring up are called non-functional requirements. These are requirements that the software needs to meet, but which aren't strictly about the thing that it does. The software needs to be accessible to users with visual impairments. The software needs to be secure. The software needs to comply with a bunch of regulations specific to a particular industry. One way to tackle all the rules and regulations that your software might contravene is to try and take care of them in the specification. But in my experience, it's very hard to find out exactly what you can and can't do without trying to do something. We can guess that the framers of the Agile Manifesto had similar experiences. When you're trying to list requirements, especially non-functional requirements, without a piece of working software, you're only dealing with the known knowns, also maybe known unknowns. For example, we know that all the buttons on a web form should have what's called alt text, so that the buttons are readable by the visually impaired. We know that it shouldn't be possible to gain control of the website by dropping sneaky code into one of the text boxes. We don't know how many people might decide to submit this form all at the same time, but we know we don't know it. We know we have to guess. So by sitting down and trying to think of all these things that might stop us getting working software out into the world, we might come up with a pretty good list of known knowns and known unknowns. But coming back to my escape analogy, when you try to get some working software as far as you can through the barbed wire to the outside world, you start to be surprised by unknown unknowns. Unknown unknowns like what? Most of the users of this system don't speak English as a first language, so they use an agent to complete the form. The site isn't set up to deal with a third party filling in the form. All applications in your field are regulated by a body that you've just heard of for the first time. The senior stakeholders knew that this site would be regulated by a particular governing body, but were trying to sneak it out without them knowing, which would never, ever really have happened. It did happen. One part of the system gets the users so excited that they won't talk to you about anything else. They just want this new function to do a whole bunch of extra things. Of course, it's hard to say what these things will be, because that's the nature of them, is that they are a surprise. You knew there would be other tripwires out there in no man's land, but you didn't know what they were. And for some of those things, there really was only one way to find out. Trying to put out working software is an important way of understanding the environment that the project lives in. This is the counterintuitive thing that I'm trying to tell you that is so important that the founding fathers of Agile put it number 2 in their manifesto. You should try to get working software as near as you can to live. Why? Because if you do, a man will jump out from behind a tree and tell you why you can't. By actually getting your software into the hands of users, you will certainly hear from those who try to stop you. Spelling mistake there. But you will also get the answers to a whole bunch of other questions. Is our team capable of writing this software? Does our team have access to the tools and resources that they need to write this software? Does the technology that we've decided to use work? Is the organization that we're working with capable and willing to pay for the servers, people, and setup that we need to deploy this software to live? Does the organization that we're working with have a workable, reasonable definition of secure that will allow them to release software to live? And perhaps most importantly, what is the value of this software? What does it mean to its users? I worked on a project for an organization that was still doing pretty much all of its business using paper documents. This was a huge organization and it processed a lot of paper. The project that I was working on looked at just one of these paper processes. The aim was to take it over and improve it using an electric document storage system. The project had a couple of good things going for it. Firstly, it was using an agile approach. Secondly, the product owner, the person responsible for making decisions about what the product did, was a former clerk of the company. She knew all the other clerks, and she knew their business very well. To start with, the project had a tough time. We couldn't get servers. We had nowhere to deploy the software. The open source document management system that we'd chosen wasn't as mature as we thought. We pushed on through some early design iterations. We dealt with a load of technical problems. Finally, we got to one show and tell where we had the team where the team had working software that they could show. It was an odd turning point in the project because that first demo was so terrible. We put together a demo, a view of a collection of documents, then a display of the document when its title was clicked. In that first demo, when we clicked on the document link, a window came up that said, "Do you want to view," spelled V-E-I-W, "your document?" Yes, with that spelling mistake. And then when the user clicked OK, an error message appeared. The look on the product owner's face. At this point, we were about £500,000 into a £2 million project. And all she had to show was a misspelled dialog box that led to an error message. It was a hard time for her. It was extremely embarrassing for the team. But 2 weeks later, it was a slightly different story. Now there was a list of documents. Now when the document was clicked, the prompt to open the document had a button that was spelled correctly. And when it was clicked, the document was displayed. The product owner seemed a little bit more relaxed. Not too many show and tells after that. The product owner had a question. Can I get this on a laptop so I can show it to the clerks? The short answer to that question was no, because all of this nearly £500,000 worth of software was deployed only on developer laptops. We were in dispute with a client over who should pay for the server space. It hadn't been included in the original bid, so the client was arguing that this was implied and that we, as suppliers, should pay. But the product owner's request to have a version that she could take around the country and show off was a powerful step in the right direction. If we could do it, it provided a good extra reason to negotiate with the people who were supposed to be giving us server space. Once the software was on her laptop, the product owner went on the road to show it to her colleagues. The demo still wasn't much. The demo still had bugs. We still had some spelling problems. But the demonstration by the product owner to her own former workmates went very well. She could shrug off any user interface issues or problems. She could show the other clerks first sight of something that would make their lives a lot easier. She came back with a list of problems she'd found while using the demo. She also had a list of suggestions for features that had come from the clerks. But she also came back with one important question. When will it be ready? From that point on, the project changed. It wasn't about delivering on a list of functions. It was about rolling out to the clerks all across the country the tiny bit of working software that the product owner had shown them. Suddenly, the path of what we needed to do rolled out before us, with the people we were delivering it to cheering us on. There was another very interesting thing about getting working software in front of the people who might use it. By doing this, we both asked and then started to answer two questions that I've already talked about. Can we do this? And who is going to jump out and stop us if we do? To the first question, the answer was no. We didn't have server space where we could deploy a live server. This was blocked because of the dispute. But suddenly the people who were trying, from our point of view, it's a mistake, from our point of view, to negotiate for free stuff, were in the way of their own colleagues. Now they weren't helping the company by being tough on costs. Now they were stopping people who work for their own organization from getting something that could make their lives easier. The servers appeared, and then the money for people to support the servers appeared. A real rollout of software started to happen. To the second question, if we try to do this, is there anybody going to jump out from behind a tree to stop me? The answer was yes. In fact, two people jumped out, an accessibility guy and a security guy. The accessibility guy claimed that there was no way that the software could be released until it met an extra set of requirements. True to form, the client claimed that we should have known about these requirements right from the start, and we should pay for them. And by the way, the client was partly right. We should have built in accessibility right from the start. It takes nearly no more effort in the coding to make sure that a website is accessible. And it actually makes the site much easier for all kinds of people to use. People who you might not think of it as disabled. Do it. It makes sense. If in doubt, pay a blind guy to look at your site. Does this sound insensitive? I really don't think it is, but maybe that's because I know several blind guys who dearly wish that people would ask a blind guy to look at their site. Then out from behind another tree, as I mentioned, jumped the security guy. He said that the project should never be allowed to go live until we could prove that it was secure. Just to leave us in no doubt about his effectiveness as a blocker, he also refused to tell us what we needed to change so that it would be secure. And of course, the costs of any changes we made needed to be borne by us rather than the client. As people who jump out from behind trees go, trying to block as people who jump out from behind trees trying to block progress go, these two looked pretty effective. Both were telling us that we couldn't release until we did what they said. Both were telling us that we had to pay to do what they said. The security guy was being even more effective at blocking us because he was also not telling us what it was we had to do. But neither of these guys were a match for the clerks. There were a lot of clerks. They'd seen this software would make their lives much easier. We kept gradually improving the accessibility, but we went live with what we had. We submitted the software to outside security testing. We addressed the most serious issues that arose, but we went live with some other less serious issues still being looked at. Putting software that just about worked in front of real users completely changed the product. Why? Because it started to build the product value stream that we talked about in chapter streams. Putting real working software in front of real users created pull, and that completely changed the dynamic and the control of the project. And this is how you deliver the impossible. This is how you make a project that seems impossible possible. You build something, you put it in the hands of users until at some point you start to get pull. From that point on, the dynamic of the project has completely changed. Your project is starting to shift from being a dream to being a reality. How do you do this on your project? Every project is a little bit different. I'll give you a month to do some setup. If not long after a month, you and your team don't have something that works, you've waited too long. By the end of that time, you need a tiny piece of working software. I'm not sure I believe this anymore. I think it's relative to the scale of the size of the project. A small bit of software that starts to do the thing that it's supposed to be doing, and you need to be able to show this software to people who will finally use it, maybe even let them use it themselves. And once you've got this tiny little thing, you should be looking to promote its status in some way. By that I mean, get the software being used by more users, or set the software up so that it's using live or like live data. Or make its deployment more automatic so it can run on more than one machine and in more than one environment. What's important with working software, at least at the beginning, is not so much the content of what you've got, but that you've got something and it's moving in all the right directions. Sure, it needs to be increasing in terms of what it can do, but it also needs to be moving from developer environments to test environments and onto the final live environments where it will run. And it needs to be moving from being tested by the team to being tested by friendly users to being tested by complete strangers. If it's a business application, it needs to move from using dummy data to using data that looks like live data to using real data. I know nothing about rock climbing, but this seems to me a bit like if you're climbing a huge rock face, you climb a bit and then you put one of those things that holds the rope into the rock, then you pull on it to make sure it's firm and would hold you if you fell, then you can climb a bit more. Yes, delivering software is a bit like that. It's a bit like climbing a rock face, and it's like escaping a prison camp, and there's a guy jumping out from behind a tree with a martini. I know, too many metaphors. The odd thing is how many people think that you can get to the top of the cliff without a rope. Even odder are the people who somehow imagine that you can get to the top of the cliff in one single bound. Gradually developing working software in all of those directions, environment, security, audience, reality of data, is the careful and effective way to deliver something, especially if that something seems impossible. And if the thing that you're doing is in any way useful or interesting to people who will use it, at some point you will start to get pull. Obviously, you like this sooner rather than later, but at some point you will start to get demand for the software. And then you will start to get demand for more functionality from the software. Not from the people who sold the idea or from the people who funded it, that's push, but from the people who are likely to use it, magical pull. And of course, gradually developing software in these directions will also result in people jumping out from behind trees. They will ask you about extra rules and regulations that you need to follow. Also, sometimes they'll tell you that you can't proceed until you're certified. How do you get certified? They might not know. One way of summarizing these ideas around the importance of working software is the 7 Ps. This is the 7 ideas beginning with the letter P. Okay, one of them doesn't, but we'll get to that in a bit. Pull. The first one is pull. By releasing working software, by putting working software in the hands of users, you create pull from users. Pivot. Moving from being pushed into doing things by internal stakeholders who value the idea to being pulled into doing things by users who value the interactions of the software is a fundamental shift. It's a pivot. It's a power shift. As I said, the dynamic completely changes. Prison camp. Most software that gets developed is in prison. It's inside an organization and it can't get out. And it needs to get out. It needs to be with its users. That's the only way that it can be valuable. So how can you make it free? Free as in running free and born free, not free as in beer, not even necessarily free as in speech. Your software is in prison. It's your job to find the fences, mines and tripwires and get it out. Promotion. A lot of the value in trying to break out of prison, and that sentence just makes sense. A lot of the value of software is trying to break it out of prison, and it comes not only from succeeding, it comes from trying and finding the things that are stopping you. When we're talking about putting software into the hands of users, we're not talking about necessarily doing that in one single step. We're talking about trying to push software as far as we can towards the outside world because we know that there's value in what we'll find out when we do and mounting risk if we don't. Surprise, a big P, even though it's not the beginning. This is what we're looking for. And yes, I know it doesn't begin with a P. When you would try and push software as far as you can out into the real world, you will be surprised. And that is because software is magic. As we've already established, there's a common view that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's absolutely the case with software. People will react to your software in ways that you have never imagined. They will do things with it that you didn't expect them to do. They will react to software in a way that is completely different from the way they would react to it if it was a requirement specification. I think that's a repetition. And when you do this, when you put software in the hands of users, they will do amazing things. You will find yourself thinking, what was that she just did? Why did she do that? They'll put things together in ways that you didn't expect. Users will totally ignore or be impressed by parts of the software or be unimpressed by parts of the software that your team struggled with and worked hard to get right. But at the same time, they'll get enthusiastic about parts of the software that you didn't think were a big deal. Part of the point of pushing software as far as you can out into a live environment is to be surprised. But of course, some of those surprises won't necessarily be pleasant. It's like the prison camp. As you try to get the software out, past fences, you'll discover other obstacles. Often these obstacles will present themselves in the form of people who suddenly appear and tell you that you need to comply with a certain regulation. Other people will tell you that you must pass a certain kind of assessment or answer a questionnaire. All of those kinds of things have to happen, and that is part of why you're trying to get the software as near live as you possibly can. But trying to promote software, by trying to promote software, you're aiming to be surprised. But that doesn't mean that the experience won't be unnerving, and it doesn't mean that a lot of people connected with the project won't get upset when the surprises arrive. And this brings us to our next P, pissed off. Trying to promote software, trying to get it out into the real world will annoy people. And this is an important thing to understand about getting working software into the world. Very few people will like you if you do this, and it is something that you must do. Who will get annoyed? Here's just a short list, and by no means is it exhaustive. Let's start with the people who had the original idea and the people who funded the original idea. They'll both feel very uncomfortable, to put it mildly, because it might start to seem obvious that this idea was very expensive to realize. Why might that happen? Because all software is very expensive to realize. Maybe as you start to push working software nearer to real users, or start to push the working software nearer to using live data, it becomes obvious that there are some stark, superficial problems with it. Spelling mistakes, logos that unwittingly turn out to look stupid or rude, or maybe there are some stark fundamental problems. Once you start to get this software near a live environment, maybe it becomes obvious that this project is a dumb idea, or that the technology will never perform in the way imagined. Maybe all these problems can be overcome. The idea is still a great idea, but the possibility or the uncertainty of it being revealed as a dumb idea will still be threatening. Maybe the senior stakeholders suddenly realize that having this software go live will be work for them, or work for a team that they haven't yet hired. Senior stakeholders have a lot invested in the project. They are linked into the hierarchy of the organization or connected to a group of investors in ways that means they'll be exposed when the software finally goes live. So even though the only way to be successful is to release the software, trying to release the software by going through various steps of promotion will still upset a lot of people who claim they want the software. Trying to release software will also upset people on your team. Who on your team? Well, it could be just about everybody. User researchers, they'll want lots more user research before anything is released. Designers, they'll want an end-to-end flow and coherent look and feel for the whole thing before anything is released. Developers will tell you that there's no point in just releasing a bit of this thing. You might as well wait until the whole thing is ready. Testers will tell you that they haven't tested it enough. All those keepers of risk, regulations, accessibility, compliance, and security, all those people, they'll be annoyed if you try to release things. So this is an important thing to understand about working software. The business of trying to get it into live, which is absolutely the thing that you should be doing, is going to annoy a lot of people. In fact, the only people who it might not be annoyed with you and try pushing with you trying to push working software into the hands of users are users. If you push some new software that makes their life easier, if you push some new software that entertains them, if you push some new software that makes it easier for them to find a restaurant, find love, find the perfect gift for their family, or find a job, maybe you'll make them happy. But what if you don't make them happy? What if they're the most annoyed? Or what if they're utterly indifferent to the software that you put in front of them? What if they laugh, snigger, shout, scream, cry, moan, or yawn? There's still an important reason why it's worth pushing software as far as you can, as near as the outer fence of reality as is possible. The reason that it's worth doing the reason it's worth doing that is because, well, the reason is a rhetorical question. When do you want to find out that nobody is interested in this piece of software? When do you want to find out that they hate it? Sooner or later? If you know the reactions of the users when you are 10% through the project, you've still got a chance to move and change and try something else. If you only find this out when you are 110% through the project, when you've spent all the money, it's much harder to do anything about the things that you've discovered. So even though you're going to annoy a lot of people by pushing working software, the only chance that you have of pleasing users is by putting software in their hands. So that's it, the 6 Ps: poll, pivot, prison camp, promotion, surprise, and perturbing everyone. And just one final thing. Actually, it's 2 final things. 2 common objections to the idea of promoting software as far as we possibly can. Reputational damage. Somebody is always going to try to stop you from promoting software by claiming reputational damage. But remember what we talked about with promotion. Remember that that's different from simple publication. There are different levels of promotion. By recommending releasing software, I'm not saying show this thing to everybody all at once. Certainly not as a first move. Rather, I'm saying promote your software. Make it available to a wider group. Do you have a group of friendly users that you could show this to? Is there a group of people that you trust? How do you frame this? Can you say that this is an early alpha, that we're just getting feedback for this? How can user researchers use this working software in their research? Then there's the second thing, legal requirements. I don't want you to tell me that something is a legal requirement as a way of stopping software getting promoted and then actually escaping unless you're surrounded by a bench of judges. I absolutely don't want you to tell me that something is a legal requirement if you haven't talked to anybody who knows about the law, or you're not going to talk to anybody who knows about the law, and you're just saying it to stop the software from being released. And again, regarding promotion, yes, some projects can't just put their software out on the doorstep and let anybody pick it up and use it. There are all sorts of security concerns. There are all sorts of regulatory concerns. But how far can you push things? So you can be surprised, so you can connect with pull, so you can pivot from pushing things out into the world to having them pulled into the world by the genuine needs of your users. So in the last 3 chapters, we've explained that projects exist in the difficult space between the idea value stream and the still to be built product value stream. I've explained the value of seeing this awkward space as a swamp that needs to be explored. I've explained the value, a complex space with many geographical features and patterns of interest and ownership that can be explored using research and other techniques. Now in this chapter, I've talked about another way of exploring this complex space by trying to help working software escape it. Of course, all this research of the swamp with a user research and working software assumes that you as project manager will do something useful with what you find. In the next chapter, we discuss what happens if you don't do that. Okay, that was just me, but that's great. Thanks a lot. I hope you like this if you see it.